G'day everybody, we're at Newbridge, and today we're talking to George, the unofficial mayor. How are you, George?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
So how long have you been in Newbridge?
1976 I moved here, August 76. Been here ever since. Commuted to Bendigo for 30 years, but basically a citizen of Newbridge.
So 46 years in Newbridge.
Yep.
And it's a long walk to Bendigo from you.
Correct. I had a horse once.
Yeah?
So I didn't ride it to Bendigo.
Oh, you carried it?
No, I took a car, I left the horse at home.
Oh, right. In the whole time you've been here in Newbridge,
Yep.
with the floods that have come through in those times, how
Yep.
many floods have you seen come through here in that 46 years?
There are quite a few. I remember 83, I think, was a big flood. And there was a couple in the 90s, I don't remember the exact date, but they covered the reserve, but without doing a great deal of damage. They also, the bridge, the way it works out with the geography of the river flow, the water going under the bridge goes around the bridge onto the road on the far side. So there are a few of them until 2011 that set the benchmark for the highest flood I've ever seen.
So you've got the low side and you've got the high side.
Yes. The side of town in which we currently situated is the high side. On the other side of the river is the low side, which has got the good soil, the floodplains and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it's also most vulnerable to the flooding. And that includes the reserve, pictures of which you can see a bit behind.
That also includes the footy club.
Yep.
And the netball club as well, doesn't it? And the tennis court.
Tennis, yes. And the camping area, the reserve is also a well-known camping area.
Yeah.
Very popular, particularly, the Christmas, New Year and Easter breaks. We get a lot of campers there.
That would have hurt the economy for Newbridge Christmas just gone, because the campers and everything else couldn't come along and enjoy the river, enjoy the reserve.
Correct.
And in coming to the pub for meals and drinks, as well as the general store, that would have made a big impact.
It certainly did. The store, although COVID made a big difference to the passing traffic for the store, but the pub has always done well out of those, holiday periods. And yes, very, very badly affected. We have opened up areas for camping that were not previously available because of the unavailability of the reserve. Behind the town hall, that's normally been a no camping area, but the no camping sites got washed away in the flood.
Yeah, the flood has taken a lot through, hasn't it?
Oh, yes. The flood has destroyed a lot of fencing. It's destroyed, we had a new resident come to Newbridge who I understand lost a lot of property due to the flood going through, because it's a two-storey building. The lower level is flood prone, the upper level is high enough to be safe, and he lost quite a bit of property. Luckily, he was able to be insured. I doubt whether he'll get insurance again, though.
So that's Phil.
Yeah, that's Phil Leonard, yes.
Yeah. Tell us about his water tank with the bridge.
He had a concrete water tank, I think a 50,000 litre, one of the big ones, pre-stressed concrete. He said it was about a third full of water, a quarter to a third full of water. The river came, picked it up, took it downstream, got stuck behind a tree just before the bridge, and then as the water went down, it moved around the tree, hit the bridge, and was stuck there for a while until the water lowered a bit. The current was still strong, and then it went through under the bridge, battering its way through as it went, and it ended up at a house another 500 metres further downstream from where it originally left.
That's a long way for a concrete water tank to travel.
It is a long way, you're dead right.
I wonder if it sent postcards back.
Well, put it this way, the insurance, as I understand it, has promised to do something about it, but it's still stuck in the earth, and getting it out will be an insurance challenge.
That's if it's still in the same spot.
Well, there hasn't been a flood since.
Well, I can't even cross my fingers, but I can cross my hands and say over the next, as long as people are still living in Newbridge, there's not another flood, but that can't be.
I wish that were true.
So,
We've had two 100 years, one in 100 years flood inside, what was that, 11 years.
well, it must have been a short 100 years.
Well, very abbreviated one, I said.
So, where, with the situation of Newbridge, in what part of Newbridge do you reside, and did the waters affect you?
No, we were very lucky, or not lucky, but we lived 2 k's out of Newbridge, in the middle of a state forest, and we are elevated enough that the water just flows past us. The water that flows past us contributes to the river.
Yeah.
A couple of, well, probably a k upstream from the Newbridge township, and you can see it flowing across the paddocks there, that goes to the river, and it's one of those things. See, you've got 5,000 acres of forest where we live, and that drains into the river, because once you get a bit of rain, the soakage into any of the ground stops. It just flows off.
Yeah, because the water table comes up,
Yeah.
it's got nowhere else to go.
Well, the surface ground is just saturated, so it can't even get further down.
So what'd you say, 5,000 acres of,
Yeah,
of forest area?
yeah, around us, there's 20,000 going down. It's forest from Llanelli Road there, right the way through to Denali and even further.
And all that water coming down to the river is just going to,
Yeah, lift
it's
it.
going to build up.
And lots of other creeks contributing. Bet Creek is one that comes into the river upstream of Lanakuri, but downstream of Cancurran, and that can be quite a sizable contribution to the amount of water flowing down the Loddon.
But it can be because there's two different lakes
Yeah,
coming down to meet into one river system.
yeah, exactly.
That's just going to build the water up even further.
Well,
So even though you're outside of Newbridge by a K or so,
yeah,
not being directly affected by the floods on your property, but it's affected yourself and your family from coming into town,
yeah,
getting essentials you need,
yeah.
getting into appointments, medical and things like that.
Well, going to Bendigo was impossible except by going an exceedingly long, devious route. And luckily we didn't need to go. But the other beauty of Newbridge, in some ways, is that the floods don't last long at Newbridge. They last a lot longer further downstream.
There's quite a lot of water builds up downstream because Newbridge is more like,
Well, it's a fairly narrow stream, right? It's fairly quick flowing, and it does spread, but that spread at 48 hours, I think, maximum, and it sort of goes slowly back towards the river after.
48 hours.
Yeah, it's not very long, but the amount of damage done in 48 hours is quite magnificent.
Oh, yeah.
Like it is awesome, the amount of water flow and what the damage it can do. And the disappointing thing is we've had houses that have been flooded before, and they get flooded again. You can imagine the heartbreak because
Oh, lots of it.
yeah,
Especially with the footy teams and the netball teams and the tennis courts. If they took up water polo, sometimes they'd get washed away and you'd have to go, oi, back here, the game's up here.
exactly. Yeah. No, the tennis and the footy and the netball can't be played here until, well, very much later this season.
I think in the last floods, 2011, I think it was 3 or 4 years before they could play back at their home
we
grounds.
Yeah, we did a fair bit of work on that. Yeah. Although the netball courts, from memory, I helped lay the concrete for the netball courts, which was 99 cubic metres it was for the netball courts. And if you're a concreter, you know how much that is.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, exactly. And when the floods in 2011 went through, just one corner of the netball courts was slightly undermined by the flood. The rest of it was still working. So we were pretty low. The sheds, around the netball courts were trashed.
They still couldn't buy it for safety reasons.
and health reasons too, because one of the things that happens is that the floods pick up some of the sewage from near Maryborough coming down the Bed Creek, as I understand the water flow, and that is in the water as it hits the Loddon, and that's why, for example, at the reserve at the moment, a lot of work has to be done rendering it health-wise safe for people to use.
But a lot of sterilisation to go on there too.
Exactly. And but tiles, you think tiles are safe. Some of the tiles have to be lifted away because the underlying mesh has been contaminated by the sewage. So that's all going to be replaced.
Yeah, that's a lot of work and a lot of dollars.
And a lot of time, you know, particularly when insurance is looking after it, and we're working on an insurance time scale rather than the trading. It's time scale.
Yeah,
What is it things?
What is it? The insurance time scale is something like 5 to 1.
Look, I'm not sure. Not going to say that word in case I incriminate myself.
No, there's no chance of that because we know that insurance takes time to come out and have a look, assess, and get everything organised and payment done so the work can be done.
Yeah.
Now, with everything else going on, how do you think it's affected the majority of the community, the major community in Newbridge, with what's happened and gone through, and loss of trade and business and the footy clubs, and I'm not sure whether they're beef or dairy farmers on the other side of the river.
There's a few dairy farmers. It's not the most common. Mixed farming is the most common. The crops, particularly canola, they have grown canola here successfully for quite some years. But the canola crop got knocked over by the water.
It would have been ruined.
It was surprising, yes, largely ruined. But speaking to local farmers, they say you put a harvester through it, you get a bit back, and they say they were quite surprised by what they did get back, but and pleasantly surprised rather than unpleasantly.
So that was before the yellow part of the canola plant came out, or was that already on its way out?
It was after, so the seed had formed, and a lot of the seed fell on the ground, but there's still enough to warrant, in some circumstances, a harvester going through and picking up the seed. Yeah. A lot of the cereal crops, barley and wheat, a lot of that was lost, but there was still some that survived it quite well. And, by and large, the farmers I have spoken to, while they've done badly compared to a good year or even a normal year, they're still not, they haven't lost a lot of money, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, they've still made something back.
Yeah, they're still getting a return, exactly. The return is nowhere near what would be normally expected, but they got a return, and the land prices, of course, are pretty high, so they're doing all right if they've got a few fat lambs.
Yeah, as long as they got their cattle and their sheep and their horses and that to safe ground.
Yeah.
And make sure the machinery was still operational.
Well, one of the answers, talking about horses, we had a meeting over in the hall with Martin Howlett, and one of the gentlemen there was a horse breeder, a stud breeder, and he said that he had to, at the last minute again, get his horses to higher ground. He got just enough warning to do it in time, but the warnings were not timely enough by any matter.
So quite a bit late.
Yes, quite late would be very mild way of
Highly understated.
understatement, yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's with warnings and everything else of possible future flooding for Newbridge area, what do you think that the authorities can make better for the warning system for advanced warning if they know that it's coming? And communities like Newbridge, maybe Bridgewater, Eddington, places like that, there's going to be hit bad.
Yes.
With late warning at the moment, how do you think they might be able to improve on that system for better warning beforehand?
Well, one of the nice things that should happen, I think, as a consequence of this event, is better mobile phone coverage, because at the moment it is not 100% down the river line at all. Colburn, I think it's Goulburn Murray Water that are responsible for the Loddon, but the irrigation I think is controlled by Colburn. But
I'm not really sure.
no, I am not entirely certain. However, there's an emergency warning system for the Loddon River, but it is neither timely nor correct.
I see they can't use pigeons anymore because
No.
they're outdated.
But
But do you think something like, you know, how the CFA's got the siren system
yeah,
to bring the volunteers and that in to go and fight fires? Do you think something like that, an advanced warning system?
an advanced warning system at any time would be good. But as I said, it was too late and it was inadequate. By the time they said it was going to be a major flood, the minor flooding had covered the track out to the reserve. Like, I particularly was concerned to turn off the power so that all the electrical equipment inside the reserve would be saved to some extent, and rather than have it shorts everywhere as water went through systems that were still operating. And I was told no. And then by the time the flood became major, rather than
It was too late.
I couldn't get on. Just couldn't get there because there's water, 3 foot deep over the track in.
Well, with the across the road here, on one of the reserves across the road, there's a toilet block, males and females and everything else. Did the floodwaters reach that and affect that in any way?
In the reserve, they did, yes, but the actual town toilets that are opposite the shop there, no. It did affect the septic tanks themselves, but not the actual grounds, the toilet area.
So there's more concerns for contamination now. I was going through the recreation reserve and the footy club and the tennis club and everything else, plus whatever families live downstream of the flood that was going to hit.
Yeah.
That could have been a major catastrophe in the health wise.
Yes, it could very well be. And for example, the friends of mine, Kim and Nathan, who live downstream of Newbridge, the water went through their house, but just up to the skirting boards, and that is then contaminated health-wise, yes. Yeah, and all the sorts of things like the septic tank will be flooded. The septic tank's made to get rid of that sort of stuff anyway, but it's still contaminated, and some measures need to be taken to rectify those sort of situations. And Kim and Nathan, I know, but on the Sunday after the recent one, they just whipped up their carpet and took it down the tip, then started to clean up at home.
Oh, at least they got straight onto it.
Oh,
They did something straight away.
Yes.
So,
They were able to do it. They knew what to do. But because when they bought the place, it had been flooded. They bought it in between the 2011 floods and the 2022 floods. And they knew what damage had been done.
yeah.
And of course, you hope that a flood of that magnitude never occurs again. But
11 years later.
yes, exactly. and they're a lovely couple. And
And it might have been the same thing that caused it as well.
yeah. Well, one of the issues that's certainly gone on my go a lot is that the brief for the management of water in the water system says we must conserve water for irrigation. Right? And that's a money-making thing. Irrigation is important, and it is, there's no argument. But in a flood, when there's water everywhere, preserving it for irrigation strikes me as slightly odd.
Yeah, because it's already been irrigated.
Yes, exactly. Heavily irrigated, exactly right.
It'd be all right if it was a rice paddy, but
Exactly. Yeah, no, you did right. Heavily irrigated. And of course, if they let a bit go early, and had any sort of predictive power over the weather, then they'd let a fair bit go early, and a lot of these situations wouldn't occur. Cairn Current, as I understand it, was 100% full before the rains came again.
I think somebody said the other day that at one stage it was 115% full.
I don't know, but I believe it. Yeah. And they're not allowed to release it for flood mitigation. They've got to keep it for irrigation.
But yet they tell farmers and everything else like that, if you want to use it, you got to pay for it. And
Yeah.
until you do, you can't use it. So we can't let it go.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's your entitlement is locked up there, and we won't let it go until all the right prerequisites have been done.
Yeah, until we think you've met the criteria. If you've paid for that water, you can well,
Exactly.
go row a boat.
Yeah.
So how do you think the morale of the community, footy clubs, sporting clubs, and everything else? How do you think the latest floods and the 2011 floods have affected the morale of the community and how the community getting to help each other?
Well, the 2011 floods, they got community involved, and I remember one of the things that happened after we had a community lunch, and the store bought some sausages, and we had a sausage sizzle, and everyone, gathered around in that little veranda area under the store and had a few beers and a few sausages. Not everyone was there. The reserve didn't receive quite the support. In 2022, the reserve got a lot of support for a clean-up. I think we would have had in excess of 100 people there on the first Sunday after the floods.
So how many people are in Newbridge?
There's, look, I'm not sure, but I think it's about 200 odd, somewhere around there. But, 100 people, you had the footy club, the netball club, all the sporting people, and a lot of the locals came down. Even the two politicians, that was Louise Staley was there and Martha Hayward, they were there helping out. But the other thing that happened at the time of the floods, the townspeople were with everyone. Like Phil got help from people. Ken O'Shea had a task force of about 20 people helping him lift up the carpets. One of my friends found a carpet layer and parked, I think he used the toilet, and said, look, there's a man down the road, he's going to be flooded. Can you give us a hand to lift off his carpet? So the gentleman did.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, good for nothing. And then came back later and he laid them for 250 bucks. Look, just a perfect gentleman's thing to do.
And that gentleman is not a native of Newbridge.
No, just asked by one of my friends to help and did. But there were volunteers, there would have been 30 or 40 volunteers running from house to house to help out. It was magnificent to watch, it really was. The community coming together to help each other. Yeah.
So that leads me into the last question for this. And it's probably the hardest question you've ever been asked.
Possibly.
Besides when you married me, but it'd probably be the hardest question you've ever asked. What does community mean to you?
Well, it is what makes life worthwhile living in a community. In a small community, everyone knows everyone else. They have all their faults. We know everyone's not perfect, and that's very obvious when you meet people. But the overwhelming community feeling, we are here in Newbridge, we will work for Newbridge, we will work for each other, is very strong in this town.
Even if you don't like your neighbour, they'll still get in. And
I am the political outcast in Newbridge because I'm a bit of a lefty, and this is not a lefty town, but I like everyone. We still talk, we're still good mates, and I'm very proud to be a member of the Newbridge community.
Right on, George. Thank you very much, mate. Pleasure to talk to you.